patch 2.6.9, Pestilence got a double damage buff, and if there's one thing that Pestilence does better than anything, it's Corpse Lance. Introducing the BloodLancer. As always, quick little caveat before we get into the video. The gameplay you see above will be at Paragon 1000. However, the gear is very good because, as you guys know, Pestilence is one of my favorite sets in the game. However, nothing is really higher than, Augment 100, which in the scheme of Diablo is pretty low. So, this build is all about Corpse Lance. And if you guys don't know, Pestilence got a double damage buff in 2.6.9, so it went from being like 1650 to 3300. And on top of that, Justice also received a buff to not just apply to minions, but apply to all damage. So between those two changes alone, this bad boy got a massive damage increase. Now, we've already posted a guide for the Pestilence. It is the SpeedFarm. It is all about clearing the entire screen with Corpse Explosion and Corpse Lance. This is a bit of a different playstyle. Before you say like, well, how is this different? So that build revolves around just killing, the entire screen and proccing Messerschmitt's Reaver and tons of Corpse Explosion, tons of Corpse Lances. This is more of the traditional, speed farm necromancer where you're running around with Ingiam at the speed of light. You're hunting down elite packs, and we're solely focusing on lance damage here because the lance damage on the Pestilence set is absolutely nutty. And because we're just focusing on lance, we can squeeze in Captain Crimson, and Captain Crimson, as you guys know, just gives us more damage and more cooldown reduction, which gives us, pretty consistent uptime on Land of the Dead and just more damage for the Corpse Lance. So the playstyle is kind of up to you guys. If you'd like to progress through the rift and just kill everything on the way, definitely check out the SpeedFarm. But if you're like more of an elite sniper, flying around, really fast mobility, killing elites, check this out. So like I said, this build revolves around Corpse Lance, specifically BloodLance. Why BloodLance is because it is just insane damage. Not only do you get the base 1750 Corpse Lance, but you also get an additional lance that deals 525, causing the amount of damage to just be insane. And you guys will notice in this particular setup, yes, we're running Devour and that will proc lances, but actually casting Corpse Lance ourselves, which we're going to do in this build, the amount of corpses you can shoot out per second, especially with high attack speed, is just insane. There are actually times where the game, I feel like, can't keep up with how many lances you are shooting out. I feel like the server just cannot handle the amount of lances you fire out. So you'll feel that from time to time. So how we're juicing up that Corpse Lance? One, we're using a 6-piece Pestilence set. This gives us 3,300% increased damage to Corpse Lance. We're wearing Corpse Whisper Pauldrons in the cube. That gives us a 600% damage multiplier at full stacks for Corpse Lance. We're using Justice, like we said, that gives us a flat 400% increased damage to Corpse Lance as long as our skeletons are commanded. Using the Captain Crimson set, that'll give us a flat damage bonus to Corpse Lance based on the amount of cooldown reduction we have. And again, before Goguk, in this build, we have 65.58% cooldown reduction. That is perfect cooldown reduction on all slots of gear, which we'll talk about in the gear section. We're of course using Crimson Sentence. Everything will be frozen anytime we're doing damage in our damage window of Land of the Dead. Everything will be frozen, so we have 100% uptime on Crimson Sentence. So it's another flat 300% damage multiplier. We're also using Squirts to give us another 100% damage multiplier. We'll talk about that in a minute. So all said and done, quite a few ways we're scaling that Corpse Lance damage. But like we said, it is a Land of the Dead build with high cooldown reduction. So we're all about just popping Land of the Dead, spamming Corpse Lances, killing that elite pack. Because again, this all revolves around Ingiam as well. And then as soon as that elite pack's dead, you're on to the next elite pack. You're flying through the map as fast as you can, spamming that Blood Rush because it will be free. No cooldown reduction whatsoever when you have Ingiam up, and just finding the next elite and then poof, pop and Land of the Dead again, rinse, repeat. You'll see in the gameplay above, we just fly. So of course we're using Land of the Dead, Frozen Lands, keeps everything frozen and gives you the corpse skills for free. That's what lets us spam Corpse Lance. We're using Blood Rush with Molting. Molting, as we've said in many of the corpse builds, has a great amount of synergy with the build. It gives you that extra corpse on demand to say you need to finish off an elite and there's just no corpses. You can Blood Rush once and give yourself a corpse. If you need to break down a door and maybe you don't have essence with command skeletons, you can Blood Rush, create a corpse, and use that corpse to break down the door. Just good synergy with corpse builds overall. We're using command skeletons with Dark Mending. Now I want to talk about this because we are using BloodLancer, right? So that costs our own health pool. And because, like I said, we are throwing out so many lances so freaking fast that we will chug through our own life pool. Like, it's bad. So we're doing quite a few things to counter that in this build. And one way that we're doing that is we're running command skeletons with the dark mending. As every time they hit, every single time you're spamming that command skeletons activate rune, you'll be getting healed a little bit based on your life per hit. And again, to counter that crazy cost, we're going to run Devour with Cannibalize, which just says every time you consume a corpse, which is a lot, we're consuming a ton of corpses here, you heal for 3% of your health. But between these two, that's still not enough to keep up the health cost. That's how many lances you're throwing out per second. So on top of that, we're also going to run Dark Reaping, which gives us flat health per target we kill. Now, going back to the command skeletons real quick, because of the buff to Justice, and Justice gives us that flat 400% damage multiplier. The hidden benefit of why that's so good is because command skeletons, well, again, it'll trigger Obsidian Ring in the Zodiac. So every single time you're spamming command skeletons while you have a target, while you're hovered over the target, right, with your mouse. This is very key, right? You have to be hovered over a target with the mouse to be able to get the bonus effect of this. So while you're hovered over the target and you're spamming command skeletons, you will, every single time they hit, they will trigger an Obsidian Ring of the Zodiac proc, which will knock 1 second off of the Land of the Dead cooldown. So make sure you have that either numb locked or you're just spamming as fast as you can. You know, quick caveat here, I would recommend numb locking, Devour, and command skeletons in this build. However, we're getting a lot of feedback lately that on console that's difficult, so you can run Devouring Aura. That way you don't have to numb lock Devour. It's not as good as Cannibalize, obviously, but that is an option for you guys on console. But you will have to spam both Corpse Lance and command skeletons. And the final skill, we're running Bone Armor with Dislocation. Bone Armor provides us mitigation, which is really, really nice in this build. We are a little squished, and we'll talk about at the end of the video early season ways you can play this build to actually make yourself pretty tanky. So stay tuned for that. Bone Armor gives us mitigation, and it gives us that on-demand stun, which we need, A, to stay alive, and B, just in case we're outside that Land of the Dead window and we want to do full damage with Corpse Lance. For passives, no brainer. We are squish, so Final Service is key. Being able to cheat death once per minute is a big deal. Wrathman's Shield is also incredibly vital in this build. Once we see an elite pack and we get set up, we can pop that Wrathman's Shield. So for 4 seconds of your 10-second damage window, right? So that 10-second damage window is Land of the Dead. You're going to be immune to damage. So you can really use this to your advantage. Oftentimes we'll be quite ahead of cooldown reduction. You'll see oftentimes in the gameplay above that Land of the Dead is back up by the time Land of the Dead is even finished on its cooldown. So you can use that to your advantage to avoid damage, to avoid getting killed, because nothing slows down speed like dying. Blood is power. I will say, this is one of my favorite passives. It just gives us a flat 20% cooldown reduction, assuming we spend 100% of our life pool. And let me tell you, because we are just drinking our own life pool, this is the easiest build ever to proc your own Blood is Power. Sometimes on builds, you'll have to take a little bit of damage and maybe even purposefully take a little bit of damage to proc Blood is Power. Well, in this one, you just, like I said, you just deplete your life pool so fast and trigger Blood is Power every single time. Dark Reaping, we already talked about, is to get that life back as soon as you get a kill. For gear, we've kind of talked about mostly everything. We're using 6-piece Pestilence, so every single time we consume a corpse with Devour and with Corpse Lance, actually manually casting Corpse Lance, we get an extra Corpse Lance as part of the 2-piece. So that's why so many Corpse Lances are happening in the gameplay above. It's insane. 2-piece Pestilence is maybe my favorite set bonus in the game of Diablo 3. It's fantastic. We also get a little bit of mitigation from 4-piece Pestilence. This obviously is in dire need of a buff, and hopefully this will be addressed in the future. The new set for the Necromancer, if you guys haven't checked out the Ice Sphere build, definitely give that a look, is very tanky. It has 2 forms of mitigation built into the 4-piece, and that just makes every other Necker set feel like the squishiest, like wet tissue in the world. And then finally, the 6-piece just buffs our damage, which is big. We are going to be using Ring of Royal Grandeur. This allows us to wear, 5 pieces of Pestilence and 2 pieces of Captain Crimson's to get the full set bonus, 6 and 3 of both. So just to touch on that real quick, we are using Captain's. Captain's gives us a flat cooldown reduction of 20% plus increased damage based on the amount of cooldown reduction that we have. And like we said earlier, without Goguk, we are at 65%. So we get flat 65% damage on top of all the damage we're doing. But it's also no slouch here as we get, resource cost reduction as mitigation. And again, at the end of the video, we'll talk a little bit about that and how to make this a little bit more tanky. We're using Jessup, like we said, to get that flat 400% damage monitor. We are running command skeletons. And of course, to go with that, we're running Obsidian and Zodiac. As you guys know, if you activate your command skeletons and spam your command skeletons, this will trigger crazy cooldown on Land of the Dead. So those two have great synergy together. We're using Nemesis Bracers because this is, like I said, we're using Ingiam in the cube to be able to, you know, move through the rift at the speed of light. Blood Rush will have no cooldown while this is active, and it's again with an elite sniping build, so you're just finding the next elite packs. You'll spam Blood Rush as fast as you can. And of course, since this is an Ingiam build, we're running Nemesis. Nemesis and Ingiam go together like peas and carrots. We say it every time, but literally the best combo in the game. Prisman Sentence, no brainer. You guys know it's pretty much a staple in any necromancer guide ever. And of course, Squirts. This gives us 100% more damage multiplier, but at the cost of making us even more squishy than we already are. Now, this will drop off. Like we said, you're not going to have 100% uptime on this. When you run into leads to have, like, you know, Lightning Storm, Desecrate, Poison, Electrified, or run into certain mob types like, you know, Spear Throwers and Lacuni Prowlers, it's just almost impossible to avoid all that damage, and so this will fall off from time to time. And you know, because we're running Squirts, we are a little bit more squishy than we would be normally, but we counter this by again being able to freeze everything on the screen. So make sure you're not just standing in something like a Desecrate, because you will die really fast if you are. Now for legendary gems, we are using Bane of the Trapped. Just a flat damage mod, good in pretty much every build ever in Diablo history. We're using Zai's Stone of Vengeance. We are trying to stay at range here. I definitely use the Templar's Oculus Ring to your full advantage here, because again, you have that crazy high mobility. So as soon as you see that Oculus Ring, jump to that as fast as you can. That's going to give us a flat 80% damage multiplier to our skills. And you'll see that a lot in the gameplay above. Try to be in the Oculus Circle if it's place in a non-deadly way, but if you don't have any Oculus, you know, make sure you stand as far away from the mob as you possibly can, because you get really good damage with Zai's Stone of Vengeance. Lastly, we talked about it multiple times in this video, but we are using Goguk, not only because Goguk gives us more attack speed, and like we said, attack speed is huge in a Corpse Lance setup because there are attack speed breakpoints, meaning the more attack speed you have, the more corpse lances you throw out per animation. So attack speed is very good in this setup. But on top of that, it gives us 15% cooldown reduction at max stacks. And we're pretty much always going to keep max stacks. So make sure as you're flying through the rift as fast as you can, you're spamming bone armor, things will just get hit with your corpse lance. So it won't be any problem keeping Goguk up. But just make sure you don't let Goguk drop, especially before you are about to cast your next Land of the Dead. Stat priority, you know, we said 100 times, but you are stacking cooldown reduction. This is a heavy cooldown build, so we're gonna get cooldown in literally every slot you possibly can. So for gloves, that means, you know, pestilence gloves. Quadfectas would be the best because attack speed does matter in this setup. So ideally, attack speed, crit damage, crit chance, and cooldown reduction, but these gloves are more than great. Shoulders, you can roll Corpse Lance damage on shoulders and chest, so look out for that. Corpse Lance damage, cooldown reduction, invite are the priority. Helmet, invite, crit chance, and a socket for a diamond, because diamond gives you more cooldown reduction. Chest, again, Corpse Lance damage can roll on the chest. Other than that, invite and 3 sockets. Belt, Captain Crimson's girdle, invite life and armor. Pants, invite armor and double sockets. We get the question a lot, like, oh, shouldn't I be socketing red gems? If you're playing hardcore, yes, go for it. If you're playing softcore, don't. Boots, straight up invite armor and movement speed. We get a little bit movement speed, and we can pick up that int in the Paragon. Also, I will mention anywhere in the secondaries, if you can get, you know, physical resistance or increased pickup radius, you'd be surprised that pickup radius will increase the speed at which you can clear, because it's less time you're wasting to try to pick up the purple globes. So just look out for that. You know, if you play Z-Necro at all, you'll probably be looking out for pickup radius already, but just keep that in mind. For bracers, this is a physical build. Corpse Lance, Blood Lance is physical damage. And I just realized in the gameplay above, I'm using Poison Nemesis. Nice. So 20% less damage in the gameplay above. For the weapon, Justice Skull Scythe. The dream roll here would be the best. That is attack speed, cooldown reduction, and damage with a socket. However, more than likely, you'll be getting a attack speed, cooldown reduction on your Justice. But eventually, hopefully, you can get that dream roll. Essence actually doesn't matter here, so, you know, look out for that. A lot of times, you know, when you don't roll essence on a necro weapon, it's bad tier, but on this particular setup. We don't care about essence pool. Same with Justice Skull Shield in fights. Crit chance, cooldown reduction, and increased damage to elites can be a big deal because this build, like we said, is an elite killer. It's an elite sniper, so increased damage to elites, great. If you can't get increased damage to elites, then go for life percentage. Obsidian Rain Zodiac can only roll one way. We just take off that resource cost reduction and replace it with a socket. Other than that, it's just attack speed, crit chance, cooldown reduction. Crispin Sentence, I don't have to tell you guys, this thing is crazy hard to roll, really. Well, more often than not, you're probably going to end up cubing the Crispin Sentence because it is that hard to get a really good one. But ideally, attack speed, crit damage, cooldown reduction, socket would be the dream. And then finally, squirts. You know, again, we are a high CDR build. We have crit chance on our offhand, so we can sacrifice some crit chance here to get a little bit more cooldown reduction. So ideally, order of priority would be crit damage rank 1, cooldown reduction rank 2, and then because this is a physical build, I would go physical rank 3, and then socket. And again, just a reminder, Horse Twister Polysons in the cube, Ingiam in the cube, and Rorg in the cube. Now, at the beginning of the video, we said we talk about a way to make this a little bit more tanky because again, not only are you squishy in this build, but you're also like, you know, like I said, devouring your own life pool. So there are going to be often times where you take yourself down to like half health. And so the mob's just like, oh, I'll just finish you off. Poof. So again, you know, if it's early season, maybe you don't have 1,000 Paragon already, or your gear's not very good. Maybe you find yourself just dying a lot with this particular setup. You know, this is the ideal setup and this is kind of a high skill gap. But there are some things we can do to make this a little bit more friendly and less squishy. So one thing you can do is you can swap out BloodLancer and run Brittle Touch. Now, this can be also really good to do if you play in groups a lot because Brittle Touch will increase the chance that the target can be crit and everything's going to get hit by this. That's why you see a lot of Z-Necros run this particular lance. And of course, by doing that, you would switch, you know, all your gear to be cold damage instead of physical, obviously. And what this allows us to do is so no longer are we consuming our own health pool so fast and so much. So we can drop Devour, Cannibalize, and pick up Voracious, which gives us a lot of resource cost reduction. Therefore, since we're wearing captains in this particular setup, we can get way more mitigation than we already have. And we're no longer consuming our own life pool, so we don't need to keep Dark Reaping anymore. And for this last passive, you can pick up something like Fueled by Death. Since this is an Ingiam based setup, it's not a great choice because you're basically spamming Blood Rush, and so movement speed really doesn't help you. You can pick up Commander of the Risen Dead to reduce the cost of Command Skeletons. If you find you're outside the Land of the Dead a lot, this can be very helpful to keep it a low cost, and pick up something like Enforcer on Command Skeletons to keep it low. Standalone won't be great here because you're only going to get 30% armor because you have 7 skeletons out at all times. Another thing you can do here that's kind of big brain is you can pick up Draw Life, which gives you some more health regeneration, and then actually drop Bone Armor Dislocation for Thy Flesh Sustained and give yourself crazy amounts of life per second, and then actually run a Molten Wildebeest Gizzard. And that'll give you a crazy big shield between, you know, the life regen on the shield, on the bone armor, life regen through the passive, and life regen on the Molten Gizzard. And that will make your Scorch shield last way longer, and you'll be able to have way more uptime on the shield itself. So those are all things to consider, you know, if you're really struggling with this play style. But obviously, you know, this is called the BloodLancer. That's the best, the most damaging setup you can possibly do. But hopefully these tips and tricks have helped you guys. And hopefully you guys enjoy the video. If you do, of course, guys, like the video, subscribe on YouTube. We're trying to get more subscribers. If you guys like the channel, if you guys want to see more builds coming out of the channel, you know, definitely support us, either Patreon or come over to Twitch and subscribe. You know, if you have Prime, yo, hit me up, dog. But we appreciate you guys hanging out either way. As always, guys, like, subscribe, come over to Twitch, ask your questions. We love you guys. Peace out.